Just got finished reading Moonwalking with Einstein by Joshua Foer. So I figured I would talk about it. What do I want these videos to be? I don't know what I want these videos to be. So I think I'm just going to talk about this book for the next 5 minutes on what I took from it. Alexa, turn lamp on. So this book, the reason I even got this book is because it was recommended on, I forget what video I saw, but I think it was like a top 10 list from Jeff Bezos' son. I don't remember. It's hard to remember where I saw it from, but basically what intrigued me about it is I'm a very forgetful person. I forget my keys all the time. I've lost my wallet a bunch of times. I'll forget where I place something. I forget people's names, a whole bunch of stuff that I wanted to work on. And this book, The Art and Science of Remembering Everything. So I figured maybe I can take something away from this to help me not be so forgetful. And basically the book is about this guy, Joshua Foer, that's a journalist that is learning about and watching the people of these memory championships where people learn, hundreds of digits of numbers in a row and memorize them, list names, a whole bunch of stuff. They just memorize stuff, and it's like a competition. And at first he's amazed that people can even do that, and as he starts looking into it, he starts learning that he could possibly learn those skills too. So he kind of talks about the different techniques to learn names and like memory palace and different sorts of stuff like that, which I'm not going to necessarily get into because that's what the whole book is about, kinda, at least up until about right here. And he ends up through learning as someone that had never done it before, and he also considered himself forgetful. He learned these techniques, and he wins the USA Championships a year later. After a full year of learning this stuff, he wins. He wins first place. And then he does the World Championship, and he doesn't win there, but he won first place in the United States, and I think he set a record for, I think it was like face to name recognition, or he set a record for something. I forget exactly what. But in the end of the book, which is the more important or the more interesting part to me, is essentially his working memory, the type of memory required to hold all these things in our head. Before something goes into long-term memory, it kind of sits in a sort of purgatory working memory is what they call it. And it said that usually for the average person, they can only hold about 7 things there. Some people a little more, some people a little bit less. Me, probably a little bit less. And the test that they use for that is a numbers test. And he was tested at the beginning and he was tested at the end to see how his memory improved, and he actually doubled his working memory, but only because the way they test for working memory is through memorization of numbers, which he happens to have a good technique for it. So although he was able to double it, he talks about that in real life, day to day, he would still misplace his keys, he would still forget this, he would still forget that. It didn't help that. All these memory techniques, being the champion of this competition and all of that, it still didn't help his day-to-day life in the way that he thought that it would, which was to be less forgetful. But what he did learn, and what was my biggest takeaway from it, was 2 things, really. One was the way he explains how he was able to get better, and he makes a good comparison where he talks about it's not just practice makes better, and the example he used was people on a keyboard. When you're still learning, you get obviously better at typing on a keyboard, but most of us type on a keyboard all the time, every day, and we're not always getting better. And the reason for that is we hit this sort of plateau where once we are okay with the skill level that we have at something, instead of it taking conscious effort and it being something that we focus on, it actually goes into a more of an autopilot type of thing where it doesn't require conscious effort anymore. It's more habitual. And a book that also helped with that was the power of habit, where it talks about just that, how once something is put into memory and it becomes habitual, it requires no conscious effort. So what he was talking about here was, in order to kind of break past that and continue improving when you feel you hit these plateaus, and this can be applied to anything. For me, I think about it and I see how this could be applied to like jujitsu and that sort of stuff. But once we hit these plateaus, it's important that the practice that we continue to do is deliberately challenging, and we set new goals that we want to achieve, and we test ourselves and we see where we fall short, and then we try to improve on that. And it's through that deliberate practice, not just kind of going through the motions of it, that we can continue to get better. So that's something that I'm going to take away from this whenever I feel I hit any sort of those plateaus in anything, in work, and like I said, jujitsu or fitness, and in reading speed, and in anything. It's just a matter of breaking it out of autopilot and putting it back into something that requires conscious effort. So that one was one of my biggest takeaways from it. And the second thing was just kind of how he explains that basically our perception of our life and everything that happens to it, and how long we actually perceive our life to be, is all correlated with how much we remember. When we forget things, you could live a long life technically, but if you remember very little of it, your perception of it will be short and dull. As opposed to, you could live a short life, technically, like years wise, but if you had a lot of impactful memories, a lot of things, that stuck with you, your perception of your life will be longer, richer, fuller, and happier, quite frankly. So what he talks about is just the fact that although these memory techniques are kind of more party tricks or for the sake of competition and these championships and all that, he looks at it more as an exercise of something so foundational and something so essential for human life, basically, which is our memory. And in the way that it explains how, and this is something that I'm seeing within myself, the more and more I read and the more topics that I get into, your past memory, the past things that you've learned, affect the way that you learn new things. Because instead of just having this new idea that's completely isolated, you're actually able, if you have more knowledge of other stuff, you're actually able to draw connections from that to things that you already know. So you're able to take new ideas and somewhat like link them into the same network of ideas that you already have stored long term, um, which makes learning easier in the future. So that's something that in the same way that it's easy for me to understand certain things, because when I read the power of habit, a lot of things that I learned from there, I was able to connect to the things that I learned from here. So instead of just having this one singular idea, now I have almost a network of ideas that makes not only remembering new stuff easier, but it helps keep it in my long-term memory by associating it with these already learned ideas, if that makes sense. And then I guess a third part of it would be the way he almost said it so eloquent in the end, in the fact that being mindful and being present in the moment is really what it all comes down to. And some of the studies that it shows in here about people that have just totally lost their memories, and also in the power of habit, and it goes and explains how these people, they have no idea where the kitchen is, but through just their sheer memory, they're able to walk over, go to the kitchen, get what they need, and come back, even though they can't explain how they did it. Um, so part of that is just it's really almost about being more mindful and being more present in the moment, and these acts of forcing yourself to try to remember things, although they seem kind of trivial, it's almost a direct way to practice that memory muscle, if you will. And well, the way he says it is to deliberately fight forgetfulness. So it's more of an abstract approach, kind of, but it was very nicely said. And to me, the takeaway from that was just to be more, that these things can help you be more mindful and be more present. And in trying to be more mindful and in trying to remember more things, it requires your focus. And in requiring your focus, it allows you to see things and notice things. And through that, you're able to appreciate them more. So it allows you to be able to have a much fuller, more present, happier life, essentially. Not directly through the memorization of stuff, but in the practice of that and remembering that our memory and what we remember and how we learn and all that is at the core of who we are. So, solid book. This video is at 11 minutes, so I'm going to stop it here. But solid book. I really liked it, and I recommend it for memory and for everything else I just said. So, now I'm going to read the Four Agreements again. So that one, I'll probably talk about that one next. Peace out.